What's going on, fellow A-Plusers? It is I, your more phenomenal host, as always, Adam Perez, back once again for another DonBrothers review as we're about to get into episode number 14 here as we really deal with the aftermath, if you will, of the farewell Momoi Taro, the apparent death of Momoi Taro at the very end of episode number 13, as we get to really kind of pick up the pieces and get a little bit more insight in regards to the idea of, can we expect Momoi Taro back? Is he gone for good? And if not, who plans on replacing this guy? And we definitely got some answers here in this particular week's episode. So let's go ahead and dive into it, guys. Remember, at the end of the day, these are always simply my A-plus opinions, but I always want to know yours. So let your thoughts be known in the live chat or the comment section box below, guys. But let's go ahead and dive right into this particular episode, because really my first impression was, wow, Momoi Taro is truly dead, huh? I mean, both the administrator in regards to Kaido, along with the Guardian himself and Jin, really don't believe that there's sort of like any coming back. Now, Kaido kind of gives us a sense of uncertainty, not quite sure as to if there is a way to maybe even kind of bring him back. Does this mean certain death? I do like the idea that Kaido kind of points out that he thought maybe Momoi Taro's own power would sort of be his undoing, considering the good fortune he spreads, but yet maybe the incredible amount of bad luck that certainly comes with it, his inability to, you know, lie and just constantly tell the truth. I can see maybe why Kaido thinks that maybe he probably would have found himself in a really difficult position or whatever the case might be, but clearly Kaido doesn't really know all the answers. So they wind up actually going to Jin to possibly get some answers, and he in fact confirms that if you're struck down by a Cerebrand blade, that it does in fact sort of mean death. Now, whether or not there's a way to certainly get him back, Jin for the most part doesn't seem too incredibly certain about it. But I did find it interesting too that even Sorrow Brother asked him, like, even though you raised him as a kid, you raised the majority of his life, are you not sad at the idea of his death here? And I appreciate Jin's answer. I mean, granted, look, if anything ever happened to my son, like, I would just be a ball of tears. I don't know if I could ever go on with life. But the idea of him saying that, knowing the idea that grieving's not even going to bring him back sort of thing, it doesn't really sort of help anybody to kind of be in that emotional state that Jin seemingly winds up avoiding. But I will say this, you know, the idea of Oni's sister, Saru brother, and the other companions, the other Don brothers, really pushing to try and save Momoi Taro, I think that really just speaks volumes in regards to the impact that he's certainly had on their lives. The idea of Oni's sister taking so much time out of her life over the past few episodes to not only figure out who Don Momoi Taro certainly was, right, but also how to get into his good graces. Now that she's a part of the team, things seemingly are all coming together, and now you take Don Momoi Taro or Momoi Taro away from them, sort of thing. I really love seeing just the impact that he's had on their lives, to the point of, was like, we have to get him back, right? Like, we don't want anybody else to be his replacement or take his role. We want Momoi Taro, and so I really appreciate the affection that they show towards Momo, or at least understanding how impactful and what he truly means to the rest of the team, and how he's really kind of changed their lives, and really just their thought process about him. So I thought that was actually pretty eye-opening in regards to it. So much in point where Oni's sister even suggests in here to use the point system. Now, I feel like the point system is a very 50-50 thing here, right? Whether you use your wish for a good reason or not, maybe you'll get your wish, or maybe unfortunately you'll have a streak of bad luck, as we get to see maybe Kiji brother a little bit over his head when he wind up using his points quite a few episodes ago, as we clearly see something is bothering Kiji brother, but we'll certainly get back to that, to say the least. But it seemingly works, the idea of using the point system, because if you use the point system, you can go ahead and grant yourself any wish that you certainly want to. You can use it to leave the Don brothers if you want to, which we've seen certainly used once already, but they want to go ahead and utilize all their points to go ahead and bring Don Momoi Taro. And just when you think it certainly works by the end of this episode, I mean, the idea that Momoi Taro literally just pops up towards their very entrance, it kind of did give me goosebumps, I can't lie. Like, when we do see Sorrow brother and Oni's sister go into battle at the very end, and you see her just wishing for Momotaro as she gets attacked. Momo, you know, she's like slow-mo falling and things like that to the ground, throwing out her wish. The fact that all of a sudden the festival music hits, a very familiar voice winds up, you wind up recognizing, and next thing you know, homeboy's being carried out on his motorcycle once again. It was refreshing, exhilarating. I was so happy, honestly, to see Don Momotaro again. So while it was definitely short-lived, I definitely was scratching my head when he unfortunately disintegrated it in front of everybody once again, after the battle wind up ending. So I am interested in the idea of using the point system to wish somebody back, but unable to fully get them back, and just temporarily. Like, I do wonder if that means going forward he's only going to be in the action pieces, or will he actually be here to certainly stay? I did see a preview for next week's episode. There is a hint that certainly he may in fact return, but if he returned in this episode and then by the end he was gone once again, who knows how long they're certainly going to keep this up for us. But I did find it interesting, and I definitely continue to have more questions, but I really do love sort of the clarity and giving us certainly some answers, as we're only 14 episodes through this season so far. So I am kind of curious how those point systems work, and why he only is able or allowed to certainly come back in his Don Momotaro form. But we'll definitely have more answers for you guys as the series continues. But again, I really appreciate Oni's sister and the rest of the team really doing their damnness to try and get their leader back. It just goes to show you how much he's actually kind of grown on them. But speaking of the replacement here, the 6th Ranger Don brother is certainly here, and he goes by the name of Momotani Jirou. That's right, Momotari Jirou. As we learned, according to Jin, from what he has learned, if Momotaro is ever lost, his replacement will in fact appear at some point in time. And here we go with Momotani Jirou here. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's almost exactly like the names, almost exactly like Momotaro. Seemingly they both come from the same realm, I would assume, as we do get ourselves a little bit of a brief origin story. I think we get a flashback to like 21 years ago, as he comes through from another realm as well inside of a peach capsule. But this time, instead of Jin finding him, he gets picked up clearly by somebody else. I think he says a police officer winds up picking him up, but for the most part the officer doesn't take care of him. It looks like Momotani is actually raised in an orphanage, and I think he says at the age of 16 he's able to finally go out on his own, and that's when he actually began sort of his training. Says that the voices in his head at an early age told him to go ahead and start training and bulking up and getting stronger, and he's been living by that mission his whole entire life, as apparently, according to the voices, there's a much bigger plan in mind for him at some point in time in his life, and whatever those voices certainly tell him, he's definitely listening to their calling. You know, one of the things that I kind of appreciate, I will say this, I do like his bubbly personality, Momotani. It feels very much like he's very respectful to the people that he's certainly around in his town, seemingly gets along really well with majority of the people there. Also, I just kind of like the idea that we literally get introduced to him as he's got his whole entire life sort of already established for himself. Co-workers, friends, etc., neighbors, some people that clearly think that he's an idiot or a dummy for, you know, maybe pursuing the things that he has over the years, solely focusing on training a little bit, thinking that there's a bigger calling for him out there. You know, I'm sure when you are open about telling people, yeah, I heard some voices, or the voices in my head told me I need to do this, yeah, I'm pretty sure people are gonna kind of look at you a little sideways. And some of it might be, you know, made up friendships. We even get to see at the end his group of like 3 friends saying farewell to him, but once he leaves, you know, they're kind of shit talking behind his back a little bit, you know, about the not necessarily good riddance that he's gone. But you can definitely see that some people feel some type of way. And so I do feel like when it comes to Momotani, he probably has a very similar impact to the people that he's lived around in his neighborhood, very much like Momotaro, but maybe a different sense of abilities or powers, clearly not making everybody upset and wanting to be done with this guy, right? Like, he doesn't have the power set of everything he does is clearly perfect, but it does seem like there is something about them that definitely impacts the people in the neighborhood in which they're in, because there are clearly some people that were happy to see Momotani Jirou certainly depart, as he has plans on being a hero. His time is now. The voices clearly told him, hey, Don Momotaro's out of the way, we need the substitute, come on in, buddy. And that's exactly what he's certainly going to try to accomplish. He says that they are now telling him to go fight as he answers his superhero calling, is what I put in my notes, and I absolutely love that. And he does wind up making his debut in here as the fire dragon with rocks. Now, you know, I'm not gonna lie, based off of things that I saw on Twitter this past week of like the Sixth Ranger in the costume, the weapons and things like that, there was a part of me that thought, oh man, is that episode happening here on the 14th? So when I get into this episode, I'm expecting the debut of a badass Sixth Ranger. He didn't even henshin in this episode. The homeboy doesn't even morph whatsoever. He literally brings along with him a pile of rocks to throw at his enemies, as he had hit some pretty funny poses, to say the least. But that's really about it. Like, he doesn't really do too much. Although I will say at the end of this episode, I think he does realize who he's the replacement of, as he quickly gets the opportunity to see Don Momotaro sort of in battle. So I do wonder if now that he's seen who he's replacing, will he now sort of up his game? I was kind of always under the impression that if the voices were talking to him, he might have already had his sunglasses. I'm very much under the impression now homeboy has no abilities outside of literally his own personal training, if you will. So I am kind of curious. I would assume, if anything, the sunglasses maybe find him in next week's episode, and if anything, what took him so long, right? Who are these voices if they're not connected to the sunglasses to like legit have you ready for this particular moment in time? But then again, looking at all the other Don brothers, I don't think they were preparing or ready for anything before the sunglasses just randomly came down. So maybe it's a case of Momotani has to prove himself, do something to where the sunglasses feel like, all right, this is in fact the guy, and they summon him or pick him or choose him to be the next Don brother for this team. We'll definitely have to wait, but I definitely think that's coming in next week's episode, whereas unfortunately I thought it was in this episode. So a little bit bummed in regards to no henshin for Momotani, but I truly do appreciate us understanding his life a little bit better, seeing his origin story and his personality. And I think I'm definitely going to enjoy Momotani, even though it feels like the Don brothers clearly don't want anything to do with him right now, right? Oni's sister very much protective of Momotaro, wants her leader back, like even pushes him, like even pushes Momotani in this episode, like, look at the ridiculous costume you're wearing, like what are you even wearing? So yeah, nobody really wanted anything to do with him, but I think they certainly will here before we know it. But great stuff in regards to Momotani here. And I also want to talk a little bit about Sonoi this episode, because he's clearly bothered. He is clearly bothered in this episode. We see him ferociously still hunting down the bestials, kind of fighting with anger. It feels like there's some resentment, or there's something that's really bothering him, and like the only way he can exercise those demons or things that he's feeling is to go out and beat something up. And it feels like he's just trying to hunt down this bestial, even though he knows he's not going to be able to kill them. The fact that he's still continuing to look for them and fight them, it feels like he's trying to get some stuff off his chest. You know what I mean? And we even get to the point to where the other Sarabrands kind of call him out and ask him certainly what's going on in his mind, because of the fact that he winds up actually protecting Oni's sister in here. The rest of the Sarabrands are looking at Sonoi and putting him very much on a high peak based off of what he did with Don Momotaro. Like, I think even Sonoza is complimenting him in regards to what he was able to do, but it doesn't seem like Sonoi is very proud of it whatsoever. And when he does get questioned by the rest of the team, you know, one of the things that he mentions is he feels like he kind of took the coward way out, you know, like even though he killed Don Momotaro, he does admit that he feels like he lost. Feels very much like his actions were a cowardly move, considering the fact that he had to trick Momotaro sort of into telling him. So look, I don't know how honorable of a guy Sonoi is, or if he's come across as an honorable guy that just wants to, you know, live by the rules and do things accordingly. But I do think there is an aspect of Sonoi that, for somebody who wants to avoid like the idea of being tainted by human emotions, or views the idea of human emotions can kind of get out of hand and turn into greed and lust and things like that. You know, the idea of human emotions doesn't seem to go over very well with Sonoi. And there's a part of me that thinks if he felt he took the cowardly act to defeat him, I do wonder if it's a sense of like you know, I did something that a human would do if they were in their feelings or in their emotions, you know what I mean? And so I do wonder if you feel some type of way about that also. And I'm not gonna, and I'll be honest with you too, there is a sense almost of like, I don't want to say grief per se, but the idea of missing what feels almost like your other half. Like when I always saw Sonoi and Momoi, I always felt like they brought a great balance to each other. They clearly understood each other, had some great conversations that maybe they certainly couldn't have with their own companions, but seemingly found solace within themselves. And when you take that away, maybe there is a sense of loneliness and not having your other half to kind of help balance you out a little bit. It does feel like Sonoi is very much in his head and very much in his feelings. And I am kind of curious if he regrets the idea of killing Don Momotaro, or if he just regrets the idea of how he went about it. But I really love to see these complex emotions and these characters continue to kind of struggle with things. Because I think if anything, after the death of Don Momotaro, seeing Sonoi act like this, there definitely seems to be something bigger between their connection, honestly, to make him feel that way. And I will say this, listen, based off of the fact that it feels very much like they have the same personalities. I mean, look, you look at the way that they spell their names, Momoi for Momo, Sonoi for Sonoi. And so, you know, there's a part of me that thinks, so maybe they're related in some way. It'd be crazy if they were like brothers split at birth or something like that. It makes me also wonder about Momotani. Does he come from the same realm as them? He clearly seems to have a completely different personality than the others. So I do wonder what's else to his story, if he's also being delivered from the Peach Capsule. Did he come from the Don clan as well? And how connected is he with the Sarabrands and Momo? So there's definitely a lot of questions in here, but the complex emotions of Sonoi are overwhelmingly great in this series. Definitely keeps me in. Appreciated Momotani's appearance in here, even without the henshin and the Oni sister stuff, and her devotion to Don Momotaro and saving her leader is beyond me. I absolutely love what we've been seeing so far. Overall, honorable mentions real quick though before we wrap up. The action was fantastic in here. Again, loving getting an opportunity to see Momotaro return, especially in his Robotaro form as he winds up taking down the Hitatsuki here in this week's episode. It was like speed against speed, and he uses that fantastic sort of like one samurai slash and then seethes his sword once again. It looked fantastic. I absolutely love when he does that. And the Zord battle continued to impress me once again. The Kiji Brothers stuff and the Inu Brothers stuff in here was rather interesting, considering that when it comes to Inu Brother, he actually bumps into Miho, or as he likes to call her, Natsumi, his ex-wife or his ex-fiance. And she clearly doesn't recognize who he is, doesn't even want him to sort of touch her. He winds up having to leave very quickly and runs away because the cop, once again, the bestial, is in fact there. And I was kind of curious as to how this works with the bestial. I'm assuming there's several bestials, one within Miho, one within this cop, and then whoever the other person is that Sonoi is certainly hunting down, that seemingly, I don't know, like, are they able to take on different faces, morph into other people? I'm assuming there's several different bestials. but maybe there's one that just jumps back and forth into like different identities and people. Like even in this episode, Miho winds up fainting, and for a second there I thought the bestial was gonna kind of like awaken within her, and she was gonna try and attack Inu brother, or also known as Tsubasa in here. But that unfortunately doesn't happen. She winds up just sort of fainting and winds up getting taken to the hospital. But the interesting aspect of this week's episode for me too was the moving forward of Kiji Brothers' storyline in here. You know, one of the things we've kind of predicted, or at least speculated, especially once Kiji Brothers started using his points, started becoming a little bit of a dick, right? His arrogance, the way that he would talk to people. You know, one of the things that he mentioned was like at the end of that episode, I think when things were supposedly better, you can clearly see how overprotective he is of Miho, and just how much he is very much dependent on her for his own sort of self-confidence, right? Like if anything happens to her, heaven knows what would happen to Kiji brother. But the fact that he's getting into these enraged modes of, you know, they'll pay for hurting my wife sort of mentality. This is the second time, or maybe even third time, his speech like that has really escalated. And for us to get a glimpse of the Hitatsuki that's sort of awaiting Kiji brother, man, I cannot wait. We talked about this, I think, when that episode happened, and I think I even put a poll up somewhere, either on Twitter or maybe on the community tab, asking like, do you guys think Kiji brother will in fact turn into a Hitatsuki at some point in time? And the fact that we threw that question out means that we were certainly speculating that it certainly was going to happen. And it's coming here, man. I'm really curious to see how it's all gonna play itself out. I would assume he turns into the Hitatsuki. They go about their business. They kill him off properly. You know, big Zord battle, yada, yada, yada. And Kiji brother certainly comes back to his own self again. But the fact that we even have a Don brother that can be manipulated and forced and like just taken over to the point where his emotions just become too much for him, it just almost shows to me like nobody's off limits, that these characters aren't too perfect to not be sort of tempted by the dark side, if you will, or their own emotions. And I think that really does certainly go a long way. And if anything, this series has made me enjoy and realize that there are stakes to this series, that we really can't sort of take anything for granted in here. The fact that the Cerebrands have killed humans, instead of them, you know, instead of our Don brothers sort of saving the day, we have seen the Cerebrands actually win by killing some people, unfortunately. And now that we've got Kiji brother in here being tempted by the dark side, Don Momoi Taro possibly dead, like is he only going to be a cameo in this show halfway through? Like I do expect Don Momoi Taro to certainly come back in a much bigger and lead role, if you will. But again, the fact that I had no idea going into this episode, like, is he really not going to be in this episode this week, or maybe even next episode fully? It just goes to show you that nothing is off limits with this writing team, and I think that's why I certainly come back week after week. The mystery is there, some great answers to the questions that I have, some really compelling characters in the emotional level, and incredible action. It's really so well balanced. I honestly could not ask for more. I'm in love with Don Brothers, guys. But listen, at the end of the day, these are just simply my A+ opinions. I always want to know yours. If there's anything that I missed, character moments, storyline details, Easter eggs that you want to bring to my attention and continue to talk about and have a fellow discussion throughout the rest of the week, we certainly can. Go ahead and let your thoughts be known in the comment section box below. And until next week, guys, I guess I will see you then. But in the meantime, do me a big favor as always. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and keep it A+. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.